Good morning and welcome to Saturday Morning Sewing with Shalancia. This is lesson 6 of our Kitchen Connection series, and today we are going to be making these really cute full-sized and fully reversible aprons with a heart pocket. So to begin, you will need your 2 heart patterns. You will need some strips. Now, this really depends on just your individual size and how much width you need. You can cut one long strip using the width of your fabric, which is going to be about, let's say about 44 inches in length. When you cut that in half, you will get your about 22 inches for each side. And for the neck, you'll need a shorter piece of it. But again, this also depends on just how much you need. And instead of using fabric, you can also use a grosgrain ribbon. This does not have to be a sewn part of it, but as we're sewing it, I will get into some more details on how you can take your measurement to see just how much of this bands and this neck strap you need for your apron. You are also going to need 2 full-sized apron patterns. Because this apron is fully reversible, you definitely want to choose 2 fabrics that might be contrasting each other. That way, if you flip it over, you can wear on one side or the other, or you can also choose 2 of the same fabrics. It really is up to you on how you do want your finished apron to look and function. Once you have all your pattern pieces and everything is cut out, let's get ready to sew. This apron looks very big, but by making it reversible, it is also very fun and easier to sew, I think, as opposed to binding it. So before we begin, we are going to just put all of our other pattern pieces aside, and we are going to start with our heart. What we'll need to do is we're going to turn it over and we are going to place our heart pieces together, bright sides to bright sides. I'm going to put a few pins inside the interior of this heart. And what I want to do is I want to leave a small opening right about here. And I'm going to sew all the way around this heart and stop right here. So this is going to be my opening. So as we get this on the machine, we're going to start on the other side of our opening. We're going to lower our presser foot, give ourselves a good back stitch 3 times, and we are going to just gently sew around this heart. You want to watch your curves, and you want to just kind of steer into that curve until you get into a little bit of a straightaway. When you get to your center, you're going to stop, keep your needle in the foot, lift your lever, and just turn it slightly and lower it back so you get a really nice pivot point for your heart. And watch the curves. As you can see, my hands, I'm just gently bleeding this fabric, helping to guide it into the machine. My feed dogs are moving it for me. I'm really just using my hands, both of them at this point too, to steer it right along. We're going to get to the bottom point of the heart, lift our lever, lower our presser foot, and we are going to just keep going up into the side of this heart. And remember, we're going to be stopping right here so we can leave a little bit of an opening so that we can turn this over to the bright side. When you do get to your stopping point, just always remember you want to backstitch. About 3 stitches should do it, and you can clear your project from your machine. Once those pins are out, a really good idea is to clip into the edges of your heart, and also to just use your scissors and clip around the edges. At the same time, you can also trim away some of this excess fabric as well. It does both. You're basically giving a little bit of what is called easement. On this curve, when you turn it over to the bright side, if you have too much fabric in there, it's just going to make your corners look bulky and you're not going to get a good curve along the bend. So by just giving it a little bit of space, not making that fabric so together and stiff in there, it helps you to just have a really nice smooth edge along the curve. And once you're finished, you go ahead, turn it over to the bright side, and then just really get your fingers in here, get these corners in and around, and poke out the bottom edge of the heart and give this a good ironing. Once your heart is finished, it should look something like this. You can now put it aside, and if you are using fabric strips as your bands, we can go ahead and start sewing these now. If you are using grosgrain ribbon, you can go ahead and just get that prepped to start sewing because you will not need to do this step. As you can see from my fabric, I've turned them both together, bright sides to bright sides, and I've also ironed it to help me not really have to use any pins. I'm going to just give myself a good ½ inch seam allowance and stitch along the open edge of these bands. And this is what we are going to use to tie both sides of our aprons. Sometimes when I'm sewing a lot of the same things and it's very repetitive, you'll notice that I just go ahead and just put the second one and keep stitching it. This is called chain stitching. It's a very good quilting technique if you're sewing a lot of fabrics, and it helps to save you the time of cutting it and disconnecting it and having to start all over. You can just go ahead and chain stitch all of these pieces together, and you can cut them once you are finished sewing. Again, this step, you can also use a grosgrain ribbon. I'm choosing to use the fabrics just because I like it, but there's also some really cute grosgrain ribbons out there that you can use as well. Once you've finished sewing, you can just clip these threads, disconnect them, and if you are going to turn them over to the bright side with a safety pin, you can go ahead and turn those over now. And like I said, I think when we're making our half aprons, if you have a turning tool, this is also a really great time to use this. And just turn these over to the bright side. You want to do all three of them and iron. At this point, you should have your heart and your bands for both your waist and your neck all finished and sewn. Before we start sewing our apron, we are going to choose the fabric that's going to have your pocket on it. Now, if you wanted to make this apron using two different pockets on both sides, you are also more than welcome to do that. For this sample, I am only going to use one, but you can also make two hearts on here. So there's a nice crease line in the center of my apron. I'm going to line it up pretty much with the center of my heart. And you can put this as high or as low as you want it to go. If you also do not want it centered and you want to make it more asymmetrical or catacornered, you're welcome to do that as well. I think that what we can do first is just get the basic idea down, and as you make more and more of these, you can definitely play around with this heart on where you want to place it. I'm going to add mine to the center. And I'm going to just put a few pins in here to hold it onto this part of the apron fabric. And remember, we left a little opening here. You do not need to sew it back by itself. We're actually going to attach it right to this fabric, and that's where you will close this opening. So what we're going to do with this heart is we're going to start pretty much from this side. We're going to go all the way down and then back up and then stop about here. So this opening, it's a nice finished opening, and we use that for your pocket. We'll get our fabric under the machine. We're going to lower our presser foot. And what we want to do is we want to just make this a nice edge stitch along the edge. And we definitely want to back stitch our 3 stitches before we start. And watch these curves and watch this fabric. As you can see, I'm just holding on to my heart really well. Watch your fingers until you go around this bend and just gently stay right along the edge of this heart and just guide it through as you are going along. Watch your curves. You start getting into a little bit of the straightaway on here. You definitely want to stay on the side of where the heart is and not sew along the edge of the other apron fabric, because we are trying to make sure that we attach this heart to the pocket. When you get to your corner, you're going to lift your lever, give yourself a good pivot, back down, and then back up along this straightaway. And again, the straight area of the heart is a little bit easier to sew. Where it just becomes a little tricky is when you are going along this side of this really big curve. You definitely want to just hold on to the heart, help your machine guide it along. And over here, we stopped about here. We want to stop at about the same location on this side, but you want to make sure that there's enough room in here that you have an adequate pocket where you can store your belongings and snacks when you're cooking. And then when you're finished, do not forget to take these pins out, and you should have a really cute pocket attached to one side of your apron fabric. Okay, so now what we're going to do is those bands that we sewn, we are going to start adding them back into our apron. I am just putting it aside. I'm going to give myself a nice little fold here. Something else you can do is also stick this into the pocket, but you want to flatten this band. Regardless if you're using fabric or grosgrain ribbon, you want to flatten it out. And you also want to do the same thing to this side where you have it attached but flattened out. And then you are going to line up the other side of your apron fabric to match up with the one that you have added your pocket to. And this is where you definitely want to start pinning. I'm going to pin this edge together because I want to secure that band in there. I'm going to do the same to this side and pin it together to secure it. I'm not going to worry about the top of my band just yet. I just want to make sure that it's all lined up and I am pinning it to secure it. Smooth it out. and lined up. I'm going to turn this just horizontally so you can have a better view of it. Okay, this is the top of my apron, this is the bottom, and this is the sides where my inserts of my bands are. I'm going to start sewing on this side. I'm going to go down this curve. I'm going to go all the way down, across, back up this curve again, and I'm going to leave the top of my apron open for now. And for seam allowance, I'm using a good 1/2 inch seam allowance. There's a lot of fabric in here. It gets really bulky, especially when you start sewing over these bands. So give yourself a good enough seam allowance so that you can get all the fabrics together and sewn. When you get to these corners, you're going to lift your lever, give yourself a good pivot, take out any pins that might be in your way, and just keep sewing. You get to the bottom corner. Again, you want to pivot, lift your lever. I'm giving myself at the bottom an extra, just like an extra inch of seam allowance. If anything is not lining up, this way I've made sure that I've captured everything, and I'm really just shortening the length of it by an extra 1/2 inch. So it does not matter. I would rather have it a little bit shorter than for any reason to have this apron have any holes in it after I've done all the sewing and I have to turn it over to the right side. I got to my 1/2 inch, I get to my corner, I'm going to pivot, and then this is the final side that I'm going to be sewing for now. When you finish sewing the apron, you definitely want to go and take out all of these pins, because when you turn it over to the bright side, the one thing you do not want to have are any pins still stuck in this apron. And then you will use your opening and you will just flip everything back over to the bright side. You should have both of these bands connected, and your heart should still be in place. Okay, you want to use the open hole and just go in and just poke out all of these corners, all of these edges, and you can give this a really good run under the iron to smooth out any bumpy edges that you might have. Once you've ironed this, also go ahead and iron this opening down about 3/4 of an inch to about an inch. It will definitely help you with the next part. And for this last band that you have, we are going to go ahead and insert it into one end of it, and then we're going to sew across the top. Once you're finished, there's also a couple of different ways to do this. If you want to sew this band in here as well, you can. And if you want to leave it out and potentially close this up and put a button on this outer edge, you can do that as well. So I love buttons. For this example, I'm going to put my button on the outside, but just remember, if you want to, you can also insert this end into here and sew across the entire opening. This is also a really good time if your machine has a decorative stitch feature. Sometimes it's tricky to know when to use those decorative stitches. I like using them on places like here. So I'm going to go ahead and give myself a really cute decorative stitch. Remember, with decorative stitches, you do not need to backstitch because part of the stitch, they do capture their stitches into them, which is kind of like their own way of backstitching. So if you are using a decorative stitch, do not use your backstitch feature. And I also love the decorative stitch with this particular pattern because it's so fun, all those doodles. If you're wondering which fabric I'm using, this is our own fabric. It's the Creativity Glows collection by Moda Fabrics. And this is our first fabric line that we partnered with Moda to produce, and just one of my absolute favorites. You'll see a little bit more of this decorative stitch once it's finished. It just takes a little bit more time than a regular straight stitch. Like I said though, you do not have to use this decorative stitch feature. It's just my way of using it because I think it's really fun. Once I get right to my edge, just be mindful of when this machine gets to the point where it cannot sew anymore and release. You might be able to see it a little bit better from my bobbin on the back. Okay. And since I'm on my machine right now, these finished edges of these bands that I've cut, I'm going to just tuck them in and just close them up as I'm here. You can do it with this band. I'll just continue using the same decorative stitch that I was just using and just close it up, and you can do this with your other bands as well. I found this really cute button. I'm just going to hand stitch it on top of here, and then my reversible apron will be complete. Thank you guys so much for sewing with me today. I hope that you guys truly enjoy these reversible aprons with heart pockets. They are really fun, really easy to make. Once you get the hang of it, you can knock these babies out in no time. They're also really awesome gifts that you can make for just about anyone. So I hope that you guys make a lot more of these. Remember, the pattern is available on our website, which is www.creativityshell.org. And if you are a member of our Creativity Shell crew, a lot of these patterns are available to you for a free download. Thank you guys so much for sewing. We will see you soon.